Once upon a time in Spain, there was a little bull, and his name was Ferdinand. All the other little bulls he lived with would run and jump and butt their heads together. But not Ferdinand. He liked to sit just quietly and smell the flowers. He had a favorite spot out in the pasture under a cork tree. It was his favorite tree, and he would sit in its shade all day and smell the flowers. Sometimes his mother, who was a cow, would worry about him. She was afraid he would be lonesome all by himself. "Why don't you run and play with the other little bulls and skip and butt your head?" she would ask. But Ferdinand would just shake his head. "I like it better here, where I can just sit quietly and smell the flowers." His mother saw that he was not lonesome, and because she was an understanding mother, even though she was a cow, she let him just sit there and be happy. To be happy, to experience pleasure. Pleasure is the lens through which we approach the subject of today's presentation. A very warm welcome to everyone. Thank you for sharing your afternoon with us for our 66th presentation, which is about wine. The Nourishment Projects is about joyous curiosity and being part of something much larger than ourselves. It is always about connection. Here are some of the references that inform this presentation. Today's narrative is all about the pleasures of connection. Connection with nature, connection with each other. Literally to just take the time to, as Ferdinand is doing, smell the flowers. And in terms of wine, the presentation pivots around the term terroir. It is suggestive of soil, but it is much, much more. And it includes the environment, the climate, the microclimate, the mesoclimate, and the macroclimate. It is about the effects of connection. So, for example, in the Mosel region in Germany, which is famous for its hillside vineyards, this is moderated by the nearby rivers. So that's the larger concept of terroir. And terroir includes how the grapevines are positioned on the topography of the land. So the hillside will drain better than flatland, and a southern exposure will receive more sunlight than a northern exposure. All of this affects the grape, which then affects the wine. So it is the connection with land, nature, and the connection with people, nurture. And it is the love that one pours into the cultivation of grapes. You will taste all this in the wine. It's the feeling one gets of the passion of the growers. And wine is intimately connected with the gastronomy, to the culture. And I'm sure we can all imagine this feeling of intoxication, of a romantic ride through the vineyards. And not just romance, agape, love, a different sort of love. The nostalgia unfolding as one watches a child discovering life. It's pleasure, pleasure, and more pleasure. And it's so much more the story of wine. That's really what's in the bottle. In fact, it's hardly anything in today's presentation about what's in the bottle. And it's much more than the mere physical beauty, and it is a staggering beauty that is associated with wine. Be it the diamond sparkle of a crystal decanter holding effectively liquid sunshine, or the everlasting beauty of history embodied in a nearly 2,100-year-old mosaic that includes wine decanters. So yes, we will be toasting with the proverbial whites and reds and everything in between. We will drink every last drop of the story of wine, which is again a story about connections. Our focus for today is the West, but we acknowledge the overwhelming storytelling about pleasure available in the East when it comes to wine. The poetic drinking contests in Japan's Heian period, Participants, as depicted in this picture being shown, composed poems beside a stream within a set time limit. And the time was set by the passage of a lacquer cup of sake. They would be floating down the stream towards the poets. When the cup of rice wine reached the poet, they were expected to drink its contents, either as a celebration of the poem's completion or as a forfeit, drink again if they had not composed a suitable verse in time. So either way, you're drinking. Speaking of wine cups, the jade wine cup of Emperor Shah Jahan. Shah Jahan is the emperor associated with the Taj Mahal. Simply to behold it, to behold this wine cup, is to drink in the beauty of humanity. Because look, the use of a gourd form for the body of the cup is Chinese in inspiration, while the lotus petals and the sensitivity of the animal portraiture are characteristic features of Hindu art. And this art object is being offered to a Muslim ruler. So features from China, from Iran, from Europe and India. This is a brilliant unity, achieving splendor. It's complete humanity. And one might ask, where on earth do you see Europe here? Okay, look here. I'm pointing now. The use of acanthus leaves for pedestal support are likely European in origin, because this is very reminiscent of the Corinthian columns one finds in European architecture. So this column ornamentation is inspired by acanthus leaves. That's where the Corinthian designs are coming from, because they want to mimic that you're walking down an alley of trees, going through a forest. That's what Corinthian columns are actually trying to inspire within those who walk in it. So the columns we just saw were taken, well, the picture of it was from the temple of Bacchus, the Roman god of wine, hence the inclusion. So this Roman temple is in the current day Lebanon. So the diversity of rule, like people who ruled these lands, Roman ones, not anymore, is evident through architecture. So here's a Bacchus flanked by a panther holding in his right hand a wine cup. So the sculptor didn't, or perhaps couldn't, capture in stone the beauty that one sees in the gilded silver cups decorated with the repoussé olive, wine, and myrtle sprays. You can see the work, effectively jeweled work. These cups and the previous statue are actually from the same time period or similar time period. And the temple itself is an adoration of more than just the wine god. The odors of sanctity of this worship is really the perfume of humanity. Imagine walking through that monumental gateway, and carved underneath the lintel of the doorway of the temple are the symbols of Jupiter. The symbol was an eagle with its wings outspread and its beak holding stalks of wheat. And we also see Mercury as the winged caduceus. What I always find remarkable, this level of finesse isn't the work of slaves, because that is the normal narrative, isn't it? That the pyramids, the temples, it's all about slave labor. That's the normal narrative. And I think it's much more than that caricature of a narrative. I mean, look at it. When standing here, this enchanted atmosphere that wraps around one like vapor, that is the immortal spirit of a master builder realizing his dream, his vision. And that is intoxicating, isn't it? The beauty and the realization that history is always present. People enjoying the pleasures of connection through wine back then, shown here in Italy, as now in India, the young drinking wine and the young at heart. Intoxication, be it through wine or through love, never gets old. For today's presentation, there's an important caveat. Wine, which is a product of fermentation, may be made from berries. It can be made from many fruits. Our focus today is wine made from grapes. Wine grapes are different from table grapes. So that said, very importantly, pleasures are subjective. So now, what am I drunk on? All right, then. My work gives me immense pleasure. And as one can see, the logo praises nature. When you take a sip of wine, be it red, white, dry, or sparkling, you are tasting nature. You're effectively drinking climate. The grapes, the oak of the barrel, the cork of the bottles, the tree our Ferdinand was sitting under, that was an cork tree. Now it should make more sense why our presentation opened with that children's story. The story of wine is entirely about connection. It is about kinship. And I hope I'm able to convey that in today's storytelling hour. This presentation is not going to be about oenology, which is the study and knowledge of wines. It has very little to do with the technicalities, things like the structure of wine. These are the terms that wine enthusiasts rhapsodize above. Structure includes the architecture of tannin and pH levels, all this stuff, the acidity that gives the wine its figurative shape and structure. This presentation is not about that. I am not interested in fancy terms like Grand Cru. Grand Cru simply indicates it's an official classification of superior grade, superior quality. To me, these terms intimidate. Because, look at it. Look at how these terms are used. Grand Cru of watches, Grand Cru of tea. To me, it's borderline pretentious. As far as I'm concerned, give me pleasure, not academics. I shouldn't have to lay an egg to enjoy an omelette. All I care about when it comes to drinking or wine is the wine good enough to make me want to finish the bottle? If it is, great. I don't care Grand Cru or not. And so when crafting this presentation, the choices were overwhelming. Do I start with Cabernets? Do I talk about Sauvignon Blancs? Do we talk about Merlots? And it's truly even worse for someone like me whose alcohol preference really is whiskey. Look at the beauty of 3D printed ice cubes. Isn't that something? Technology and art together. And so the pleasure of beauty truly is intoxicating. So how did I frame my selection for this presentation? Okay. Every birthday, I indulge on Sauternes. These are sweet dessert wines. I really like sweet things. And so we'll focus on French, borderline German wines, while acknowledging that wine grows in many areas in Europe. All those dark brown spots indicate places that grow wine. Similarly, dark brown spots in the continent of South America, areas of Patagonia and Argentina. In Africa, way bottom, South Africa is known for wine. And in the United States, it's not just California, which we all know grow wine, but also in Michigan, wine is grown. Wine, again, is about taste, and so it's about the tongue. These receptors on our tongue have a lot to do with the individual experience of pleasure. Weird as this picture may seem to you, and I understand it gives up the vibes of a Rolling Stone album cover, really give it a thought. How could I have shown it otherwise? Did you want me to show a picture of a real tongue? I will. Here you go. You see, I've had great fun putting this together. As I told you, I had been drinking while I did this. Could you tell? But in all seriousness, the narrative of the grape wine. Let us begin. Because first question, what grape, which grape, and on what vine? The Chardonnay, or perhaps the Merlot, or the French word for pine cones, Pinots, Pinot Noir, Pinot Gris, Pinot Blanc, They're all genetically identical. Pinot Gris and Pinot Blanc are mutations of Pinot Noir. The grapes look different, they behave differently in the vineyards, and they are very different on different soils, and they make extremely different wines. The many variations of wines. Pinot Noir is one of the most popular wine styles in the world. This famously fiddly nature of the grape is prone to both rot and sunburn and makes it tough to grow and consequently valuable to winemakers. And some of the top bottles made from Pinot Noir are exorbitantly priced. Pinot Blanc, or which is also Bianco, is a further mutation. So the wine, the grape is moving from gray, blue, pink tinged grapes, which is of the Pinot Gris color, to a white grape. This found home in both the Alsace region of France and in northern Italy. It's also found in Germany, and there it's known as Weissburgunder. And when we go to Germany, one of my favorite wines, the favorite grapes, well, the wine comes from this grape, Gewürztraminer, all sweet Rieslings. And it's an early budding and an early ripening variety of grape. And so from that point of view, it's very similar to the Pinot Noir. Wine, again, really is about tasting climate, the environment. The soil matters tremendously. For Gewürztraminer, the soil has a mixture of limestone, which is a dolomite rock, and clay. So the aromas reveal a high complexity. And for the Gewürztraminers, they're characterized by a ripe stone fruits such as apricot, peach, lychees. You can also have flavors of what do you call those? Aromas of apples and pears, including rose petals and sweet spice. I think Traminer, I believe, or one part of that word means spice. Another type of grape, the Palomino. True to the name, it sounds Spanish. Knowing that I like opera, remember the opera Carmen? And in the Gypsy song, they have these lyrics: near the walls of Sevilla, at my friend Lila's pastillas, I'll dance the seguidilla and drink some manzanilla. You're very, very lucky I'm not braying out the tune of this song. You're welcome. I'll think of it. Manzanilla. What exactly is it? It is a very bright, pale, straw-colored wine. It has a sharp, delicate bouquet with floral aromas, and you can also have it, sometimes it smells of almonds or chamomile. It's very sherry-like. So how did a Spanish drink become so associated with the British? Because when I hear sherry, I think of, British grandmothers. So now that brings in history. In the 16th century, so this is Elizabeth I's time, England defeated the Spanish Armada, thanks to weather. Spoils of war included casks of sherry, and thereby sherry became the rage in Elizabeth's court. And by the way, I was just being facetious. Sherry is not just for the proverbial little old ladies anymore. It's regaining popularity. Tastes fun. It's nice. And there are obviously many other varieties of grapes, Syrah, Malbec, all of that. But again, this is not an academic presentation. So let's look at the life of a grape. So starting from the left, we see the leaf bud grows from a node. So there's the node. The bud opens and the grapes will form from these flower buds. Moving on to the next step. On the left is the flowering, which is known as inflorescence. Go to the middle, the grapes grow over 100 days. And on the right-hand side, one sees the Pinot Noir grapes start changing color. Variations are being shown here. Noir grapes on the left, Riesling grapes in the middle, grapes with noble rot. And noble rot is actually very craved because it is the fungus needed for dessert wines, like my beloved Sauternes and the German Rieslings. So viticulture is the science of growing, of cultivating and harvesting of grapes. Wine involves fermentation. And again, technically, any fruit is capable of being used But if it says wine on the label, it's made with grapes. Okay. Not every fermented alcoholic beverage is wine. Fermented grains are beer. So here's a fun fact. Beer is liquid bread. Why is that? So the order of the Cistercians, I think they call it Cistercians. It is a branch of the Benedictines, and this order is made of cloistered monks and nuns. And in strict accordance of Benedictine rules, these monasteries were kept economically independent and autonomous. Fermented grains were a cheap meal, so this became part of the daily diet of both children and adults. So it was cheaper and healthier to take liquid bread, beer, than water and milk, because the water and the milk were often polluted and could transmit infectious diseases. So what happens when you brew? You eliminate all the bacteria. So it's the same reason people in the Far East in China drank tons of tea, because boiled water made the water safe. It eliminated waterborne diseases. So in monastic orphanages, children were fed light beers, mostly made of oatmeal or other heavy cereals. That is why beer is called liquid bread. And because of its antibiotic properties, this cheap meal, beer or liquid bread, monasteries produced it regularly and abundantly. And so brewing became art. And these monks became master brewers. Even today, I mean, it's true. In St. Sixtus Abbey, which is in Flanders, drinkers come in person to the abbey shop nestled in Flemish farmland to pick up their purchases. Effectively, this is the world's most sought after beer, because the monks make just over 5,000 barrels annually, and there are about 19 monks there. At peak times, the hotline has attracted more than 85,000 callers an hour. I want to know what this beer tastes like. But churches are about more than just beer. Wine is spiritual food. The Corinthians reveal that the same night on which Jesus Christ was betrayed, he took bread and he had given thanks. He had also taken the cup after supper and reputedly said, and I assume the good Lord said this in Aramaic and not English, and I'm going to quote the Corinthians. This cup is the new covenant in my blood. This do as often as you drink it in remembrance of me, close quotes. So I meditated as a Hindu. Did the Lord like Cabernets or Merlots? Because, Hindu gods specify a lot about their food. They tell you everything that they want, the colors and what they want to eat and how often they want it served. So I thought, did Jesus sniff the bloody drink? And by saying bloody, I'm not swearing, because sangria means bloodletting. I love doing all this research, because one does have choices when you're painting these scenes like Leonardo did. In the Renaissance time, in these are times of Leonardo, times of Michelangelo, paint is expensive. Red, which is the color of suffering, and that's one of the reasons the cardinals wear the color red. Red is a very expensive dye. So look at all the colors these painters could have chosen to depict the wine the Lord drank. Options galore. I mean, look at that. Look at that palette. Let there be light, literally golden light, or in the name of the rosé. St. John the Evangelist would approve, because St. John is often depicted in pink. But the Lord's color, the color of garnet, red. An animist like me would choose La Grande Dame Rosé. As is anyone surprised by my choice? It's a beautiful pink gold with light copper hues. You see, I like pink gold in jewelry as well, because rose gold, which is the color, looks best with my skin tone. And skin tone matters, because color for wine comes from, among other things, the skin of the grapes. It also comes from the tannins of the oak barrels. As I researched, I thought, do you think Jesus swirled his wine, sniffed it, as this model wine expert shown here is doing? Do you think Lord Jesus pronounced about 2,200 years ago, there are hints of olive in this bouquet of my Last Supper wine? I doubt it. So this term bouquet is a technical term for oenologists, which is, the bouquet is talking about the wine's aroma, its fragrance. And wine experts often say things like, it opens with the bouquet of honeysuckle and jasmine. And they go on to include things like grapefruits and pineapples and vanillas, choices galore. The even description says, tastes, aroma of fine leather. Who wants to drink something that says fine leather? One also finds champagnes with hints of Earl Grey tea. It's really interesting because wine really, again, reminder, is about tasting the soil, the environment, the term terroir. Because really, the oak forests for the barrels, that term is called cooperage. Cooperage is the term about making the barrels and the casks. One can spend hours talking about the wood grains. On the left, the density of the American white oak. In the middle, the oaks of the French forests, and they are rich in tannins. And on the right, the tight-grained Cecil oak that lends a note of vanilla to the wine because you're storing the wine in these casks. We could also talk about the economics of barrel making. There were many ways to approach this presentation. I mean, the craftsmanship of cooperage, of barrel making, it is something to behold. It is truly something to treasure, this level of craftsmanship. And they are treasured. The barrels of Chateau Cam are no jokes. They are essential to the signature taste and history of that wine. And the deep pleasure found in patience reward, when you nourish something, nurture something, to watch this grow into a forest, and then to treat this wood with reverence. Because when you're working with this level of wine, the ambiance of these wines is luxury. And these are areas, wine that comes from the areas of northern France, bordering Germany, areas near Champagne, near the Alsace region, Mosel region. Take a good look. These barrels have Lalique stoppers. And why not? Lalique's factory is in the Alsace region. Alsace was once part of Germany, and then it became part of France. And the French government gave tax incentives to encourage industry. And so factories were built, among which one of them was Lalique's factory. So I love it when you're researching wine, you're really learning about wine, you learn about history. It connects us to history, to other people. And so in World War II, the area of Champagne was occupied by the Germans, but the vineyards survived relatively intact. So wine coupled with the intoxication, that is the beauty of Lalique. Look at these decanters. A decanter with sepia patina. Look at the relief of grape leaves. The work is marvelous. Look at the wine stopper, the intaglios. It means the kind of beauty that just pulls you in. Lalique wine glasses, Merlot glasses in this case. I mean, if the more you look, the details stop you in your track, demands that you pay attention. I mean, look at this. The blackbird on the stem. Why? Because Merlot is allegedly named after the blackbirds that love to eat these ripe grapes. These blackbirds were of the similar blue-black color of the ripe grapes themselves. So in French, these blackbirds were called merles, or Merlot, spelled M-E-R-L-A-U, hence the name of the drink, Merlot. The shape of the glasses, the shape of these wine glasses, the champagne coupe, which was designed that way so that it opens up the aroma, versus the champagne flute, which is designed long to preserve the bubbles. Nowadays, the flutes come with a bit more of an open tulip rim to release the aromas. I mean, you can delve into so many things when it comes to the pleasures of wine. Wines really are perfumed with nuances of beauty and history. So take the region of Champagne during World War II. So all these regions, World War II areas, by every standard, by today's standards anyway, this man would be deemed to have had an alcoholic issue. Churchill apparently told his colleagues, and I quote, "Remember, gentlemen, it's not just France we are fighting for. It's Champagne." Close quotes. He really did say that. He apparently had consumed like 40,000 bottles of champagne. I don't know if it's true, but he drank a lot. So really, how to begin about this liquid marvel of champagne? Should we talk about sabrage, which is opening a bottle with a sword? It is an affectation made famous by Napoleon's armies when they were celebrating victories. Or should we talk about Marilyn Monroe, who reportedly took a bath in the champagne from 350 bottles of champagne? Or do I want to talk about the 19th century style icon for men, Beau Brummel, who reportedly washed his shoe in champagne? No, none of this. How do I want to bring closure to the story about this special wine, the effervescence of champagne? How? Let's put a cork in it. That's how. Because champagne corks, as one can see, are shaped differently than corks for other bottles of wine. But that isn't the only point, because done poorly, corks affect taste. And it's also important to know, again, nature, corks are the thick barks of a tree. And this tree is sustainable. It takes 43 years to get the first crop of cork. And in between, once you take the bark off, it's 9 years between harvesting of the cork from each tree. Every aspect of wine is nature. It is about climate, things I care deeply about. I pour myself into these presentations. I try my best to make them entertaining, but please know my choices are never frivolous. The opening story of Ferdinand had nuances that are very relevant for today's narrative. There he is, surrounded by flower, sitting under a cork tree. The bees that pollinate the surrounding flower is part of the terroir of cork. And it is this cork that seals the wine. The cap design of the cork is designed to withstand the build-up pressure of carbon dioxide, which lends champagne its effervescence. Without the mucilage, which is the wire securing the cork, this cork could become a projectile reaching up to 25 miles an hour. No joke, it can hurt. Champagne and cork have even a more intimate history. Veuve Clicquot, the brand, uses its cork and it has branded it with the insignia of an anchor. So this brand, Veuve Clicquot, hints at an even more beguiling story when it comes to the story of champagne. So the French term veuve means widow. So the daughter of a baron, Madame Clicquot, had an excellent education. Upon becoming a widow, she had taken over her husband's champagne business and she made history. So in an era where women were excluded from the business world, she had dared to assume the head of the company. And she expanded her business to all four corners of the world. She astutely courted the well-renowned Francophiles, which was the Russian nobility. So imagine sipping Veuve Clicquot champagne while admiring the sublime craftsmanship of Fabergé eggs. Really, the brand of champagne is luxury. And the intoxicating history of champagne. That story includes remarkable women and not just Madame Clicquot. So this story, widowed with 2 children, and one of them an infant, Madame Louise, having been educated at an English boarding school and being familiar with the British affinity for hard ciders, she had championed dry champagne. It is thanks to her courage to change the expectation of champagne flavors, we now have what is known as brut champagne, dry champagne. And there's more. This striking beauty had courted the Habsburgs from Austria. Madame Clicquot courted the Russian nobility. This one courted the Habsburg, and she established her champagne empire. This widow was no damsel in distress. When she inherited the house, the champagne house, after the death of her husband, Mathilde here made changes to ensure that the champagne she produced lived up to her own exacting standards, to vouchsafe for its quality, and she renamed that house after herself. I mean, I love this woman. She called it Veuve Laurent Perrier. She named it after herself. And it's truly a pleasure to discover women like these. And check out this one. Well into the 20th century. I mean, I love this quote. I drink champagne when I'm happy and when I'm sad. Sometimes I drink it when I'm alone. When I have company, I consider it obligatory. I trifle with it when I'm not hungry, and I drink it when I am. Otherwise, I never touch it unless I'm thirsty. Close quotes. I mean, it's these women intoxicate. I mean, their boldness seduces and often reduces me to breathlessness because I imagine what they desired. Not the prosaic, let's get another husband, but let's make millions. Imagine their sense of fun blows my mind. And it's not just champagne. Chateau Cam. When you peek into the history of this wine, it's amazing. In 1788, when the count who actually owned the house, he had died after due to a riding accident, his young widow became the head of the family, and she showed extraordinary acumen in managing that estate. The widow Francois Josephine built a new wine cellar, which was an audacious step during those times, and she transformed the estate into a true business and developed an international reputation. Thomas Jefferson was a fan of this wine, as am I. It's sickly sweet, it's perfect. I mean, the unexpected pleasures abound in the story of wine. I mean, look at this one. This Region Epernay by Champagne. Look carefully. Within this undulation of green, spot the Birching Bar. This is a treetop champagne bar. And so this high level oxygenates the effervescence of its signature drink, champagne. So literally, you can drink champagne and go ziplining. I am not joking. Talk about a sense of fun. And the story of champagne can be about the pleasures of gastronomy. I mean, there are many ways to do the story. I love asparagus with champagne butter sauce. Perfect. It could have been the story about the beauty of bottle openers. It could also have been about the pleasures of pairing wines. You know, one of the reasons we have such a diversity of wine nowadays is also due to the ready availability of the diversity of cuisine. Because it's not just, French cuisine is all. With the diversity of cuisine, really, the bouquet needs to open up, because how do you pair? What wine do you pair with sushi if you want to give an option beyond sake? And these are one of the reasons we have such a plethora of options in wine. The pleasures incorporated into the art of wine definitely include wine labels. During Madame de Pompadour's time, she used to have porcelain wine labels made, which she tied around the wine glasses, wine bottles. Imagine the beauty of that. Look at wine labels done by Dali. art pieces, wine labels, so easy to see, by Chagall, by Miro. Look at this one, easy to tell, by Picasso. And this one is selected for one person only. For who, my darling? Olafur Eliasson. You know who this is. So this presentation could focus about so many things, about the beauty of bottles in different forms, from ancient wine jars that were called amphoras, to the process of glass making, how bottles were made. I mean, look, this is asymmetrical. They're not the same shape. And there's a huge history in that. England's use of coal, so they could really heat things up, help design stronger, sturdier bottles that could withstand the pressure of champagne. Because the French bottles made with burning wood, these bottles often shattered due to the pressure of champagne. The story is really fascinating. We could have talked about beauty of drinking vessels, the beauty of rhytons. These are ancient vessels used in religious rituals when wine was offered to the gods. I mean, this is a slide that opened our presentation. Look at this rhyton. It has a short, round spout, you can see right there, emerging from the stag's chest, and is just above its extended front legs. And if you look carefully, look at the delicate cloven hooves. There's beauty in every aspect of the story of wine. And the beauty really is in the craftsmanship. I mean, pleasures galore in the story as far as I'm concerned. And as the presentation nears the end, I return again to my one constant pleasure, nature. And this concept of terroir. Again, environment, climate matters. High temperatures are detrimental to wine quality. They can just dry the grapes out. As is excess cooling, frost, it can damage the grapes. Misting the air can significantly reduce or even entirely prevent crop damage from frost or excess heat damage. So there's a vineyard, Bodega Chakra in Patagonia, which is eons ahead with this philosophy that the essence of winemaking is connection, kinship. You can imagine why I love this house. This place planted 7,000 rose bushes, 6,000 lavenders near their vineyards, 38,000 trees to nurture the environment, the true terroir, everything surrounding it, because they work in harmony with nature, all of nature. The bouquet for the wines produced by this vineyard includes nature in the larger sense, because the result of the fermentation, when that fermentation is designed by nature, happens through pollination. Bees ferment this wine, and it's not through chemical additives like sulfur dioxide. This is organic wine. Here in this vineyard, pesticide control is managed by dogs, because dogs can sniff out mealybugs. And when they sniff out the one infected vine, that one single vine is removed without using environmentally damaging pesticides that ruins a lot of space, a lot of hectares. This picture that you saw in the beginning of the presentation had not been included for cuteness. This was a working dog. Winemaking in harmony with the natural environment. It is an expression of love and devotion to the individual principles of this man. Bodega Chakra impresses and gave me the supreme pleasure of toasting those who live by their passions. I have no doubt there are many impassioned individuals in the audience today, and I raise my glass to you. And as always, it is really a pleasure for me to spend an hour with you. Thank you for your time. I wish you joy.